Welcome to Sharp Football Analysis. Today, Freeman and I are going to talk about Joe Burrow, Sean Tucker, and a lot more as we get ready for Week 11 of the Waiver Wire. So make sure you stick around. What is up, everybody? This is Sharp Football Analysis. My name is Raymond Summerlin, and I am joined, as I am every single Monday when we record this, to talk about the waiver wire with Freeman Smith, the creator of FAABLab, a wonderful tool to get you ready for the waiver week, to get you ready for how much you need to bid. Make sure you go to FAABLab.app. How you doing, Freeman?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Pretty thin waiver week, but I think that gives us an opportunity to find some good value.
Yeah, I don't really want to, I don't want to right at the top, say, hey, don't listen to this. We're going to talk about some interesting stuff. There are some interesting deep cuts. But as we were diving in, on Monday morning, looking at all right, so who are we going to talk about this week? We always try to talk about three guys. It's not a stuffed full week out there on the waiver wire, at least in terms of, where we talk about and the players that we talk about. There are some interesting stories. We'll talk about a couple of those right here at the top, but at least in terms of guys that are available in at least 60% of ESPN leagues, or excuse me, at least 40% of ESPN leagues. There's not a lot out there, or there's a lot out there of players, we've already kind of talked about, like Alex Pierce, who I feel like I write about every week. Just go and pick up Alex Pierce at this point. Parker Washington, who we talked about last week. So there's lots of those kind of guys that we just don't want to discuss again. So it's going to be interesting, and there's going to be some interesting situations. Sean Tucker specifically, as I mentioned in the cold open there, Sean Tucker specifically is really interesting, but we'll get to that in a second. But we did have some big news drop here on Monday. We record this on Monday afternoon. We record this before the Monday night game. And so if something big happens in the Monday night game, that's why we're not talking about that. But on Monday, we got that Joe Burrow is going to be designated to return. He's actually available in 40% of ESPN leagues, which is a bigger number than I expected. I have a pretty deep league in which he is available on the waiver wire because we only have 4 bench spots. It's 14 teams, but we only have 4 bench spots. And it is super flex. I kind of think whomever had Joe Burrow should have just held him in that type of format, but they didn't. So you should go and check your waiver wire about Joe Burrow. He's out there, and you obviously need to add him wherever he's available. But obviously he didn't get off to a great start this season before the injury. That Cleveland defense turns out that they're actually good. So we maybe give him a pass on that, and obviously got hurt in game 2. We had some concerns about Burrow recreating what he did last year. But there's not a lot of fantasy analysis to this. When Burrow comes back, you're probably going to be excited to play him if he is available. And especially unless you have somebody that's just locked in every week starter, you should probably prioritize going and get him. And I don't really know what else to add to any Burrow discourse. You got anything for me?
Yeah, well, I actually was one of those teams that picked him up just about an hour ago. So mostly because you can't resist just getting Joe Burrow for free. It's just a standard QB league. But I think one thing that's interesting is when players are inactive before the week starts like this and then get activated, they don't go through normal waivers on ESPN at least. So I was
especially since the Bengals were on bye this week. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. I was thinking it was because he had the injury tag, but yeah, it's because of the bye. You're right. And so you can just pick them up if you're somebody who is going into Monday night with a, extra defense on your bench, or for me, I dropped just a flyer running back. And so I don't know if all the other formats are like that, but on ESPN, if you want to just avoid having to pay anything, he might just be available to add right now. And I do think, there's a lot of buys week 14, so maybe by then you can trust them, and they have the Bills that week. So it could be something where they end up heating up going into the fantasy playoffs. I could see it working out, and looking back, if you get Joe Burrow for free and you're already somebody who's clinched the playoffs, and I think it's a pretty cheap little trick. It usually doesn't come around that often.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can get Joe Burrow for free, then go and do it. And I also would say some of the concerns we had, or at least I had personally, about Burrow coming into the season, trying to recreate what he did last year, was, is he going to get the same type of volume? Is the Bengals defense going to be quite as bad? Will he run quite as pure? And it turns out the Bengals defense is just as bad. And what we've seen from Joe Flacco is 45, 47, 34, and 47 attempts as Bengals starter. That's everything that we that we want to see, right, out of Joe Burrow when he gets back. I will say the schedule is not ideal. It seems like he's aiming for that Thanksgiving game against the Ravens in week 13. That will be, a short week. Sometimes the short week stuff is weird, but if he gets back to practice this week, we'll see what happens. But if he hits that week 13 target date that it seems like based on reports he's aiming for, he would get the Ravens, the Bills, the Ravens, and the Dolphins and the Cardinals through week 17. I actually forget who they have week 18. If you're playing in week 18, change your league settings next year. But that's not an ideal schedule. The Ravens defense has been much better of late, right? And so that's not the Bengals defense that you thought of early in the season. They have been much better. The Bills have had issues on defense, but a lot of those issues have been more in the running game than they are in the passing game. Obviously, you're not scared of the Dolphins. The Cardinals have very quietly limited opposing quarterbacks, both through their own ineptitude and just kind of the way that they play defense. They've given up multiple touchdown passes to just 2 quarterbacks all season long. So that's what we're talking about there. It's not the best schedule, but of course he's Joe Burrow. So if he's out there and we have a reasonable expectation of health, then you're going to like it, especially since, like I said, with the Bengals defense, we know what the deal is going to be, especially you think about the Ravens and Bills game and you go, are those great matchups? Well, who cares if the total's 56 points, right? And they end up scoring 80 combined. It doesn't really matter. And so, there's not a lot of analysis to do here, but if he's available, go and check. Another guy you might go and check is on RJ Harvey. RJ Harvey's available in 30% of ESPN leagues. As we're recording this on Monday afternoon, we do not know about J.K. Dobbins' injury. It seems just reading the tea leaves, they may have gotten some good news, but the fact that he went for a second opinion on a foot injury and then had this really weird tweet, I don't think it was weird tweet. I think it was justified and rightful tweet, angry about how they never call the hip drop tackle. They made such a big deal about the hip drop tackle, not this past offseason, but the one before, and then absolutely never call it. And then we see people still getting hurt with it. I'm team J.K. Dobbins on that. But that's a weird situation to watch. And then you look at the rest of the roster, it's Tyler Bidet, who I assume would have a receiving role if something happened to Dobbins. They have Jaleel McLaughlin there, but he's played 6 snaps all season. They have Deuce Vaughn actually on the practice squad, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. So that's fun, but obviously you're not expecting him to be a super lead back kind of guy. So, it's interesting to see if Harvey's out there and let's see what happens with his injury, I guess would be the short answer to that situation.
Yeah, and of course, J.K. Dobbins, even if this hip drop tackle thing ends up being a 1-week issue or not that much of an issue at all, he's not historically the picture of health, right? So I think if RJ Harvey's there, despite what happens with J.K. Dobbins' ankle, was it this week? I think either way, it's going to be the perfect kind of stash to have down the stretch. A rookie explosive player who's shown flashes and is behind a historically very injured J.K. Dobbins. I think you'd want him either way, right?
Well, I don't know. I kind of could see, when I saw that he was available in 30%, I'm it kind of makes sense. He's not going to be available in a deep league. He's not going to be available in a lot of FFPC because that's just not how that works. But again, if you're in a shallower league, he had those, was it 3 weeks in a row with a touchdown, I think, but they were receiving touchdowns, and it came on
4 touchdowns in 2 weeks. 5 touchdowns in 3 weeks or something.
Something like that. Yeah, it was
3 in 1 week on 7 touches. So
yeah, it was it's one of those things where you're it's not. None of it was sustainable. None of it was going to keep happening. And then we saw obviously this past week they're in that close game with the Raiders. Inexplicably, I would say, in that close game with the Raiders, and then we don't see the usage. So in the terms of, if we're thinking about the kind of people you put on a bench, then he's right in that range. He's in that Tyler Algier range, right? We keep using Tyler Algier as this example, but we saw why just this past week, because he's the kind of guy that's going to get some touches. And when he gets touches, he could possibly find the end zone. Harvey specifically is an explosive back. And so if you're just in a bye week bind, you need to go, all right, this guy's going to get some touches and maybe I'll get lucky. Harvey's that. And then obviously has a contingency value. So he is a great bench stash. I will agree with that. But also I could see why someone might have dropped him too. It's kind of that kind of range.
But I also feel like the kind of person that would drop him would have picked him back up after a 3 touchdown week,
yeah,
right?
That's fair. No, that is 100% fair.
Where he's available, he's not making it through that.
Yeah, no, that is 100% fair. All right. Let's move on. Let's talk about some of these ads for this week. Before we do that, though, I do want to mention that week 11 is our free week. Every single year here at Sharp Football Analysis, we do a free week. You unlock all of our NFL betting recommendations and all of our fantasy football content for week 11 for free. If you go to sharp.football, it'll show you how to get on board. It'll show you how to become part of this free week. We've already released our first computer total for week 11. We'll be sending out a lot more soon. We'll be sending out a lot of props as we do every single week. Our computer totals have hit on 70% of our computer total recommendation over the last 6 years. Make sure you don't miss out on this free week, sharp.football. Make sure you go and check it out. All right, let's get started with the ads. Again, as I said, it's not the strongest week in terms of potential ads. We'll see what happens with some injuries, but even some of the injuries we're watching, like with Jackson Dart, like we're not super excited about going to get Russell Wilson, right? With Garrett Wilson, who does seem like he's going to miss some time, like AD Mitchell, like I guess we could add him in deep cuts, but like that's like, where are you really going with that? Arian Smith, right? You're going to try to play that again. So it's not a great week, even, if you look at some of the injuries, but I do think it's really interesting here to get started with Sean Tucker based on just everything we've heard about Bucky Irving and the trends we've seen from Sean Tucker as of late.
Yeah, I mean, I've always really liked Sean Tucker. I think we've talked about him a couple times on this pod before, but he was an undrafted guy, but he was undrafted because of general heart issues. So he's not like your typical James Robinson undrafted type of guy, or somebody who
dare you? How dare
I missed out on the James Robinson vote, so I'll always be a hater. But no, but I mean, he's not the kind of guy who either didn't have a complete profile coming out of college, or lacked athleticism, or is undersized or something like that. He's somebody that would have been drafted. He's super athletic and actually had a relatively good profile in college. And if it wasn't for this heart thing, he would have been drafted higher. And then I think we have been talking about him pretty differently, right? And he had a big game last year when he had the opportunity. And then it just seems like, I don't know, this Bucky thing is so weird. It's been quietly kind of one of the weirder stories of the season. Like something that looked initially like it might be 1 or 2 weeks. And then now this is almost like, yeah, the team is definitely hiding stuff, right? And it makes it seem like their whole the Bucs can't really be trusted with their injury designations this year in general, right? So you don't know, and I think that uncertainty makes Sean Tucker actually really inexpensive, because it's not like something where we know Bucky's going to be out for a while, but there is that chance. And Rachaad White's more the receiving back, and not always the most explosive. So I think Sean Tucker makes a lot of sense. He's been getting a lot more carries lately. And I think, if we did find out some news about Bucky that he's going to be sidelined for a while, or potentially the whole year, the Bucs have a really nice schedule. I think next week we'll get more into playoff specific targets, but even just coming up, they've got Bills, Rams, Cardinals, Saints. And I mean, some of those aren't conventionally what you think of as the best matchups, but if he ends up getting really involved in the offense and the Bucs are, in these high scoring games, I think compared to some of these other ads, I think Sean Tucker is the most high value speculative ad of the week, probably.
Yeah, no, we'll have to see kind of what I decide to do with. There are running backs I've decided I'm just not going to write up anymore, like Algier and Tyjae Spears and things like that. So we'll see what I decide to do. But as it stands, he's probably going to end up being my number one running back. But again, that number one running back will be speculative, as you point out. Like, this is a speculative situation for him. To your point, I just want to point this out. Sean Tucker had 3,000 yards from scrimmage and 27 touchdowns over his final 2 years at Syracuse. To your point, like, this wasn't like one of those, like, and again, Syracuse, obviously Syracuse is not the football power, right? But you play in a Power 4 conference, like, that's a real school, real production. So just to kind of point your thing out, and your thing about him getting more looks as of late, I think that's the important, the trending touches. And we've done this a few times this year in identifying players, right? How are their touches trending? How is their snap share trending? And so this past week, we had 9 carries for Tucker, to 10 to Rachaad White over the last 2 games. Tucker has just 2 fewer carries than Rachaad White. And obviously he's just been a better runner when he gets the ball, because Rachaad White has throughout his career just not been particularly efficient as a runner. I had hopes whenever the Bucky Irving injury first happened that, we had seen better from Rachaad White early in the season. I was like, all right, are we maybe going to turn the corner? Turns out that has not happened. Tucker's 2 highest snap counts of the season have come in the last 2 games. His 2 highest touch totals of the season have come in the last 2 games. All of that's a really good trend. And to your point, they've already basically ruled Bucky Irving out for week 11. We still have no idea what's going to happen. The one thing I will say, and you're 100% right about the schedule, and especially after the next 2 weeks, the schedule gets like elite. The schedule is mint. It's so we got Bills and then we got Rams, and I'll talk about why those matchups are concerning for different reasons. But then after that, we get the Cardinals, Saints, Falcons, Panthers, Dolphins, Panthers. Elite. We're excited to run through that if we're the Bucs. The one thing I'll say, the Rams matchup is not good any way you look at it. The Bills matchup would be great if we get the game script for Sean Tucker. The concern is that Rachaad White continues to just run a lot more routes, and that is what Rachaad White is going to do. And so if we get into kind of like a back and forth game state, or the Bucs get down early, then we could see a situation where Tucker just doesn't get enough carries against the Bills. And that would be, obviously you're just not going to get there. But the Bills are 30th in yards per carry allowed to running backs. They've allowed 2 running backs in the last 4 games to eclipse 200 yards from scrimmage. Like, we're talking about elite matchup if the game script cooperates and we get enough of Sean Tucker. And that's at least exciting for this week, since it seems like we're not going to get Bucky Irving back for this game. But then I talk about that schedule down the way, and you go, okay, well, that would be great for Irving, especially if we assume this to be like he's more of a runner and White's more of a receiving back. But like, is Irving back by then? They still haven't put him on injured reserve. Like, he's got to come back at some point, right? If they're just keeping him on the roster. And so that's where this gets tricky with Tucker. But if there's not I guess Jonathan Taylor's on bye this week, so that's the one where you would say that you're really concerned about it. But like, you're not probably going to have bye week concerns, but maybe if you have injury concerns or something, and you can like plug Tucker in, hope game script cooperates, hope this trend continues, and he gets a really big game against a good matchup, or just simply in DFS, play Sean Tucker in DFS. Like, all of that makes a lot of sense to me. But like, from a long-term perspective, does he get to that schedule where it's good for him? I just don't know. And that's what makes it trickier.
Yeah. But I mean, that's what I think is kind of nice about this week too. It's thin, but it's also cheap. Like, It's pretty interesting looking at last year's week 11. It was actually the least valuable week as far as ROI on FAAB dollars spent. And so I went into it thinking, oh, there must have been a horrible week, right? You look at the top guys, and it was like Audric Estime and Jaylen Wright and some of these rookie running backs that it's a good reminder that it doesn't always work out for these rookies, even if we're like,
there's a real survivorship and confirmation bias that happens with the rookies.
Yeah, especially these last few years, it feels like.
It is true, though. It is true that they do tend to do, like, en masse, they tend to do better, but that doesn't mean that all of them do. I guess that's the point.
Yeah, but then actually, for some of the cheaper guys, you had some of the biggest wins of the year, which I thought was pretty interesting. So Pearsall was kind of marching up from weeks 9 to 11. And then Jonnu Smith was like a $3 ad this time last year. And he might've been the waiver wire pick of the year. So I think, this time of year, it starts to get pretty diverted between people that are looking for 1 week payoffs and long-term stashes. And because of that, if you're in the long-term stash position, I think you get these guys for a lot cheaper than you did a few weeks ago when you're bidding against 11 different teams, right? But if you are in if you're going against 4 other teams to make that last playoff spot, and you need 1 week out of Sean Tucker or some of these other guys we'll talk about, then of course, in hindsight, it's going to look like those players didn't pan out because maybe they didn't, but they might have actually done what you needed. You spent 25 FAAB dollars on them and then got your 1 week win and ended up making to the playoffs. So I think that some of that stuff can be misleading, and maybe Sean Tucker ends up being one of those guys, right? But I think everything has to be kind of looked at through that lens. Now you're competing with less people on these FAAB auctions each week, and so naturally, hopefully the price goes down because it's kind of split.
Yeah, and I do think he could actually be like, I'm going to be very interested. We'll have to see how it all plays out. We'll have to see if we hear anything, right? We're recording this on Monday afternoon. There's lots of news that can happen, right? Until then. But I do think Tucker will be somebody I'm targeting in DFS, which means I'm definitely targeting him if I need, like, for whatever reason, like you said, I need that win this week because just the matchup is really good. And if it plays out a certain way for him based on what we've seen in recent weeks with his usage, recent games with his usage, it could certainly work out. All right, let's move on and talk about Emari Demercado, available in 81% of ESPN leagues. Had him as an ad last week after I can't remember if we talked about him last week or not. We talked about so many
maybe.
bad low-level running backs on this podcast that I can't remember exactly who we've gone through. But I mean, this whole situation is just odd with this running back because we came out of week 10 and we saw Demercado used more in like the like early down role because they continue to have two very specific roles in this backfield in the way that they operate this backfield. And we saw Demercado used more in like the early down carry role, and then we saw Bam Knight get maybe a few more targets. We saw that flip this week, even before Bam Knight left with injury, and then Bam Knight leaves with an injury. And in the fourth quarter, we get Michael Carter playing 8 snaps to just 3 for Demercado, which seems like Michael Carter stepped up into more of that Bam Knight role. We still have no idea when Trey Benson is going to be back. It's Jonathan Gannon seemed kind of positive about him last week, but he did not commit to a timeline. We don't know anything about that. As I mentioned before, Bam Knight is hurt. This is just a really weird situation. I think I'm at the point with this backfield that unless it's Trey Benson, I just don't care. And that might be the way to approach it, but I don't know. I don't know kind of where you stand on it.
Yeah. The Cardinals are so frustrating this year, right? Especially, it's so funny to have them go from being like the most boring, consistent James Conner for every year, easy value play. It's like when your friend gets out of a long-term relationship and then just has a bunch of messy girlfriends after that, and you're like, oh, we just needed him to find Trey Benson now. I'm hoping for I'm sick of hearing about Michael Carter getting promoted and then back to the practice squad and Demercado dropping balls at the 1-yard line. Like this running back room is so frustrating. But yeah, it's kind of a weird parallel because Demercado's also same year as Sean Tucker, undrafted free agent, kind of a similar. I don't really get why he was undrafted. He was pretty athletic, had a good college career. Had like a big game for TCU in the playoff, and then I don't know if it's somehow related to issues like that, dropping the ball at the 1-yard line or something. But I don't.
Funny you mentioned that. I follow that kind of stuff pretty closely, because in the draft stuff, and obviously I knew the Sean Tucker story. I do not know the Demercado story. He did not have a ton of production, and he was in school a long time. He played. I pulled it up now. So he 5 years at TCU, and he joined TCU as a sophomore. So he was definitely part of that COVID class. His high year was only 746 yards from scrimmage. So maybe that's it. But I don't remember even really looking at him. Like, it was one of those things where he showed up. I don't even remember what year that is now, but he showed up on the Cardinals in a very similar situation as this. They needed somebody, and he just kind of showed up. I think it was 2 years ago now. And you went, I don't really know who this guy is, and I had to do some research. But now, like, he does make plays, and he made another big play this past week. So, like you said, maybe there is talent there. He had the drop at the goal line, right? And so that kind of limited him. And then he got hurt, right? But then he came back, and he's been relatively effective and had some big plays. So maybe I'm wrong to wash my hands of this because maybe he's actually kind of okay. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, the first time I remember seeing him, he had a big touchdown against the Bears last year, and it was like the longest touchdown since that famous Kenyon Drake touchdown or something. So it definitely has the explosiveness, and I think he's kind of like the perfect 1 week guy. If you really need a win 1 week or the next 2 weeks, Trey Benson's definitely not going to play this week, right? Michael Carter, I don't know what their deal is with him. We were talking before the show so they've used up now all 3 of their practice squad elevations on Michael Carter. So they're going to have to sign him to the actual 53-man roster if they want to keep using him. And I don't know what Bam Knight's hurt as well. So I think that was a shoulder thing, right? So they were kind of cryptic about that as well. So I think if you need short-term production, I think he's a pretty good ad actually, and has a bit of a receiving profile, but I would imagine that completely disappears when Trey Benson comes back. And Trey Benson's injury is a little more, was a torn meniscus, right? So it's kind of a consistent timeline on that. Like it's not some mysterious Bucky Irving type of thing. I think it's just about when he feels good. It's usually 4 to 6 weeks, and we're right in that timeline. So I would imagine that, yeah, Demercado is a short-term fill-in, but I think he could be pretty valuable for that.
I believe Knight was an ankle, just so we're
ankle, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but where I mean, like, yeah, it is what it is, and yeah, Benson was the meniscus, and we're right in the range of like when we expected him to return. And
yeah,
so
I think today, yesterday was like the first day he was eligible or something, right? So
yeah, so we're right in the range. So yeah, that's ultimately it's short term if it's anything for Demercado for sure. And I just don't even ultimately know what the short term value is this week. They're at home against 49ers. The 49ers are so injured on defense. Like maybe it's there, but I don't know what it is. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, go ahead. I would say the Rams were running on him really well last week, so I could see, yeah.
Our one true king, Blake Corum, who always hits our longest for us. We appreciate you, Blake Corum. By the way, sign up for Free Week. You might hear about another Blake Corum longest this week if you sign up for Free Week. We love a Blake Corum a longest bet. He's one of our safety valves for sure. All right, let's move on and talk about the Patriots wide receivers. We mentioned Kyle Williams was my deep cut last week, and obviously he came out and he had the long touchdown. That worked out. We're feeling pretty good about that. But if you look at just like the usage from the usage like perspective, and you look at the final box score, I come out feeling a lot better about Mack Hollins than I do about Kyle Williams, which I'm not excited that that's the case. I would rather have seen a lot more Kyle Williams, but I think what we saw from Mack Hollins this past week, specifically his usage and how many targets he was able to get, like that's really positive for him as we wait to see when Kayshon Boutte will return.
Yeah. I want to like Kyle Williams because I really liked him as a prospect for the season. And he's one of those guys you'd have to wait on because Josh McDaniels and the Patriots don't really play rookies until late. So we've seen that kind of materializing with Henderson and stuff. So it's all those things that you think, okay, maybe Kyle Williams will be this post-buy or second half rookie bump. But then it's just Mack Hollins. He ran the most routes on the team. So it's like you can literally get the wide receiver one. I know Kayshon Boutte's out, and yeah, I think he probably will miss this week just because they're playing the Jets on a short week.
Yeah.
I don't know if Vrabel thinks that way, so maybe not, but I would imagine at most he misses one more week, right? But he's really, you're getting the guy who ran the most routes and I believe got the most targets, right? So it's that's pretty rare. If you just switched Mack Hollins and Kyle Williams production, Kyle Williams would actually be a, blow half your FAAB type of guy.
He'd be a smash ad, but we're not excited to add Mack Hollins because he's been in the league for a long time. He's mostly a blocker. He runs around barefoot everywhere, and just like we know who Mack Hollins is, right? There was a time, by the way, speaking of, we're going back to Demercado, I didn't know enough. There's a time where Mack Hollins was a reasonably well thought of prospect as well, and he's made a very successful long career. Although the reason why he's made that long career is one of the reasons why I'm a little bit skeptical of this. He was already playing a lot of snaps because he's a really good blocker and he's just the kind of guy that is going to play snaps. He obviously saw a big bump with Kayshon Boutte out. Also, I should say this is probably on us. We should have probably recognized that if we're trying to replace what Kayshon Boutte was doing, Mack Hollins makes a lot of sense to go and do that. And so maybe that's something that we should have even focused on, last week, even though Kyle Williams did get there for us on that one long play. And so that's all there, but also he's been running a decent number of routes. His target rate per route has this year only been 16.6%, which isn't awful, but it's not good. But over the last 3 games, he has a 7 and 10 target game. So you can make all of these up and down cases for Mack Hollins going up against that Jets team. Justin Fields can't complete a downfield pass apparently. So how much do they have to throw? There's lots of Mack Hollins is tricky. And as you say, Boutte will come back. And when he does, you're not gonna be interested in Hollins. So it is a short-term thing, but against that Jets defense, maybe it's enough, right? Maybe it's enough here for Mack Hollins. And so, yeah, if I'm picking up one of these guys for a short term, I do think it's Hollins just because we know he's going to run routes and it seems like he's going to get some targets when he's out there.
Yeah, I guess it's a perfect little microcosm of the difference in what managers should be looking at right now. So if you need a win now, Mack Hollins is good, but it's not like that. Jets is a great matchup, but then they get Bengals, Giants, Bills, Ravens, Jets again. It's so crazy, this schedule. And so I think that, yeah, Kyle Williams, I mean, if you just want to close your eyes and say, maybe something happens, maybe he gets more run, maybe there's an injury, and just the rookie thing, I could totally see somebody saying that as well. But yeah, Mack Hollins, when you said the barefoot thing, was he the guy who has like all the weird pets? Is that him?
Oh, I don't know about the pets. I just know about the barefoot, like, because he walked into, didn't he famously walk into, like, on the snowiest day in Buffalo, walk into the stadium barefoot? I believe that's him. I believe he's the barefoot guy. Yeah. But I don't know about the pets. I don't know.
Okay, yeah. I mean, they're just completely.
He has an exotic pet. He has snakes. He
that's the guy.
Wants to get a pet alligator. I like Mack Hollins. Have you ever been on the back of an alligator?
Have I been personally on the back of an alligator? No.
It's an interesting experience. I'll tell you that. I have in fact been. I grew up in the bayou, so take that for what you will. And then the biggest game warden I've ever seen in my life came over and just straight picked up this alligator that had been throwing me around, 14-year-old me around. So good for that. I think that's the biggest man I've ever seen in person. Anyway, we're getting distracted on this day with not a lot. I think your point about it is, if you need someone for this week, Hollins. If you need like a long-term stash, you're just hoping for the best because of that schedule, I still think Kyle Williams. And that's maybe more hopium. I hope we get more Kyle Williams. We obviously saw what he's able to do with the ball in his hands and what he can do as a playmaker. And so I hope we get it, but we'll see. By the way, if you're not already subscribed to the podcast or our channel, make sure you do that. Subscribe to our podcast, turn on notifications, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You'll get all of our podcasts throughout the week, including our Friday show, where we give away a ton of free bets that have been doing great this year. So make sure you go and check that out. Also, by the way, make sure you go check out FAABLab, FAABLab.app, the best way to get ready for free agent bidding. I use it every single week to try to get an idea of how much people are going to be bidding on these players that I'm interested in acquiring. So make sure you go and check that out. All right, let's move on. Our final segment every week, a segment last week that featured Kyle Williams, our deep cuts section. Who do you got here in deep cuts?
Yeah, I think our deep cuts have been maybe better than our actual
we've got Kyle Williams, we had Gadsden, there's another one. I think we've been doing okay on the deep cuts.
Yeah. Okay, so I had kind of a package deep cut between Jayden Reed, Brandon Ayuk, Brenton Strange. There's a lot of guys at this time of the year that are forgotten about, but are going to be activated off IR now. Probably don't have to bid anything on them, and because if you get 1 week ahead of their return, like kind of just sometimes comes randomly in a Schefter tweet, like we saw with Joe Burrow today. So, any of those guys interest you? I'd say the Jayden Reed has. I think the Packers have a really amazing schedule. Brandon Ayuk, we've seen what he can do. What are you thinking with those?
I mean, Strange. Guys? You mentioned Strange last week, and that was definitely the week because I believe he was. They opened his window today, or they announced they're going to open his window, and obviously he was playing. I mean, he was fine. He wasn't getting into the end zone, but they need targets. We'll see what happens with Brian Thomas. So Strange is definitely the favorite. I just don't know if we're ever going to see Brandon Ayuk. I still don't know. Like every time they do a update on Ayuk, it just doesn't sound good, and so I don't know. So, but Reed. I mean, with what's happening with Golden, again, record this on Monday afternoon. We don't know if Golden's going to play. It doesn't kind of seem like he's going to play. Obviously, Christian Watson's coming back from the injury. Tucker Kraft is out for the season. They need guys. They need playmakers. We'll have the same concerns about Jayden Reed we always have about Jayden Reed, that he's only going to play in 1 and 2 3 wide receiver sets, not in 1 or 2 wide receiver sets, that their offense wants to be run heavy and doesn't want to throw it as much as I think we would like them to as like fantasy players. So like you're going to have those concerns with Reed for sure, but the opportunity is there, especially if Golden is hurt, and especially if they want to pull back on Christian Watson and not put too much on his plate coming back from that injury, and especially with Tucker Kraft out. So Reed is definitely interesting to me for sure. I actually don't know how many leagues he's available in. That'll be something I look up before I write the column for sure.
Yeah, it's funny with these. I was like, is this ridiculous? Maybe Ayuk's owned at 90%. You just forget about these guys, which is why I think you
Ayuk,
get
I
the
know,
value.
is not. Ayuk, I know, is more in like the 30% rostered range
Okay.
because I've just been seeing him every week, and I don't know what to do with him. I routinely don't include him in the column because I just don't know. Like I genuinely don't know. Every report, every time John Lynch or Kyle Shanahan talks about it, it sounds bad. Every single time it sounds bad. Like it's not even like they're doing the Brock Purdy, Ricky Pearsall part of it. We're like, yeah, they're
Uh-huh.
coming along. Does seem like Brock Purdy's going to be back this week, but we've said that before, right? But so like they're not even doing that. It just doesn't seem good with Ayuk. So I get really confused about what to do with it.
I got one more for you. Devon Vele,
There you go.
the non-injured player for you. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I mean, he ran the routes this past week. They talked him up and they said we're going to get this guy more involved. Now that Rashid Shaheed's been traded away, he did run the routes. He didn't really do anything with them. He's also weirdly old for what you think. He was an old prospect, so it's not like you're getting like the super young player. But I mean, there's a role there for him. This offense has been at least somewhat competent with Tyler Shuck at quarterback. So yeah, I'm not against it. You wonder. Olave's there. Juwan Johnson's going to get his, right? And by the way, I'm so excited. We had that lull with Juwan Johnson, and now we're back with Juwan Johnson. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, so like I don't know what's out there for him, but he's going to run some routes, and so that is what you want to see. And actually, Shaheed was getting a I would say surprising number of targets from Shuck in the limited time they played together, and so maybe there's a role there for Vele as he goes. I've got a few to throw at you. This one I don't know if he counts like officially counts as a deep cut, but he is only rostered in 5% of ESPN leagues. So I'll throw Luther Burden out there. DJ Moore left the game early, so that's an injury to watch this week. He did come back. DJ Moore came back on the game, but he's dealing with yet another injury. Burden set a season high with nearly 50% route rate. He still has to play more to be a factor. Also, the other thing is Moore, and he's had some injury issues, so that probably plays a role. But Moore has played his two lowest route rates or run his two lowest route rates on Bears dropbacks over the last 2 weeks. Again, we talk about those trends, trying to pay attention to those usage trends. So that one's there for him. Any thoughts on Burden?
Yeah, I think, well, it was like just about 50% of snaps or something. So, I mean, that's pretty encouraging, especially since it's such an uptick. And yeah, I really like Burden. I mean, he was one of those guys like, I think the year before he declared, he was looking like he was going to be the first wide receiver off the board. And then he had kind of a down year. So, the talent's there. Bears took him in the second round, and he's shown flashes this year. I think he's probably going to need somebody in front of him to, either DJ Moore this injury to be bigger or Rome Odunze to go down or something for him to really carve out enough of a role to be reliable. But yeah, there's been some weird, I mean, there's just always so many chaotic things going on with the Chicago Bears, I feel like. And like Odunze's dad sending tweet and stuff. And
that was awesome.
Not that it's honest, like, of course it's not related at all. But
what about last year with the Bajent's dad and all that nuts? That was wild. Why do the Bears always have this stuff happening to them?
Yeah. All the family members of Bears players are always like Simone Biles' his husband, and it's got like high profile crew members. But yeah, I think Luther Burden's the type that if he did pop off towards the end, he'd be the exact archetype of it. It's hard to envision a path right now, but that's why he's a deep cut. And yeah, I think there's a chance, in the playoffs, we end up looking back and he's one of these like Ricky Pearsall last year or any of these rookies that just do it down the stretch. I think if you had to pick somebody who's barely rostered that could end up being a huge factor in the playoffs, you'd have to say Burden, but I would bet against it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am as well. I will say I agree with you mostly that something probably has to happen to Moore or Odunze, but that's Zacchaeus' role, and Zacchaeus just doesn't disappear. He's still there. But like that's Zacchaeus' role is just there. Zacchaeus has 4, 8, 7, 3, 6, 6, 4, 5, 7 targets. Why can't those be Luther Burden targets? I don't understand. It doesn't make
they do seem to like him though, Zacchaeus. Yeah, like whenever you see the locker room stuff.
And we talk bad about Zacchaeus, and like we shouldn't. Zacchaeus has had a pretty darn good career and produced most of the time when he gets chances. So I don't want to like diminish Zacchaeus, but like I feel like we would just much rather see Luther Burden than that.
For sure.
A couple other, these are much, much uglier names. The Raiders apparently hate Jack Besh, and they want nothing to do with Jack Besh. They would much rather, in a completely lost season, play Tyler Lockett. I don't know why that's the case, but that is what they are doing. Lockett had 80% route rate and led the team with 6 targets this past week. So there you are. That's something for you to know in deep leagues. And then the other one, and this one, I mean, we're digging into the dynasty graveyard for this one, and that is Treylon Burks. Terry McLaurin already. I almost brought up Treylon Burks last week, and I thought I can't do that. I can't bring up Treylon Burks, and so I didn't. I did put him in the column in the deep cut section, but I didn't bring him up here. Got to bring him up now. Terry McLaurin's already been ruled out for week 11. He had a 50% route rate per drop back this past week. Chris Moore completely fell out of the rotation. They're like trying to run out there Robbie Chosen. Luke McCaffrey's out for the year. They have to have somebody on the outside. It looks like Burks is going to get a chance. He actually had some plays, made some plays this past week. So, they get Miami this week, which obviously you like that, in Madrid, I believe, right? That is the Madrid game.
Yeah.
And just sending Spain our best with the Commanders at the Dolphins. But yeah, so like everything's good there for Treylon Burks. Again, it's one of those, we're not missing a lot of guys this week. So like, I guess like Olave and Pittman and Pierce, if you've been playing Pierce, right? So we're not missing a ton of guys this week that you're going to get really, really that worried about, that you're going to have to dig too terribly deep here. But I do think, especially in deeper leagues, or again, if you're playing, showdown DFS in that Madrid game, Burks is definitely a name to know. I feel dirty saying all of those things, but here we are.
Yeah, well, I think Lockett, like we always underestimate, it seems like, when somebody goes back for, one last rodeo with the old team, like Keenan Allen this year. And I mean, Lockett is Adam Thielen in the past. Like I feel like there's been a few examples where somebody has come in, we've considered them totally washed, and then they go back to their old coach or quarterback they played with, and they have a brief but impactful resurgence. And I could see that happening with, obviously it's a funny situation that it's a totally different team, but Geno and Pete Carroll, I could see Tyler Lockett. I mean, he's always been a possession receiver guy. So if he's going to end up running the route, 80% of routes, that's pretty valuable actually. And hard to get excited about, but I think, with Treylon Burks, it's kind of the year of resurging careers, right? I can't think of anything more Titans than a former first overall pick going to another team and being good. And he ran the second most routes, I think, after Debo, but pretty far in second. And he's such a different player than Debo. So, I mean, he like really works for that team on paper. And
he's exactly what they need to complement Debo Samuel and Zach Ertz.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Debo Samuel and Zach Ertz are going to get the targets. Like, that's what's going to happen. But they've been looking for that guy when Terry McLaurin is out. And again, the early rule out already this week is not promising for moving forward after that, especially as their season begins to appear more and more lost as we move forward, right? And we'll see what ultimately happens with Jayden Daniels. We got good news about his injury, but we'll see what they decide to do with him.
It's so crazy how well he's progressing through that injury.
That was one of the nastiest things I've ever seen on my television, and the fact that it's not season ending is wild. But like, Burks is just what they need. He is what they need to complement the guys that are actually going to get the targets. Now, does that mean he gets 5 targets? You got to hope for a touchdown. Probably. That's why he's in this section, right? But yeah, like he at least fills the role they need filled if Chris Moore and Robbie Chosen, aren't able to do that and get the job done.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, there's always a chance that it's a lost season for them, and they keep Terry on the bench and just try to bring it. I get the passing game going a little bit to see what they've got, and Burke's going to be in one of those season garbage time type of players that ends up being valuable. I don't see it happening, but I mean, it would totally match the theme of the year, right? With old first round picks having resurgences on new teams.
So I think we've talked about this before, but I grew up in Houston. I was an Oilers fan as a kid, and then they moved, and I stuck with the Titans through the Steve McNair era. But then after that, I kind of fell out of love. But I still have like a little soft spot for the Titans every now and again. Like, I'd still get really excited if I saw Chris Johnson in the street, for instance. Like, I don't know, you have this soft spot for that team that doesn't go away. And it would be, as you said, it would be so Titans for them to trade AJ Brown, to draft a guy to replace AJ Brown, for it never to work out for him, for them to then spend a bunch of money on Calvin Ridley. That hasn't worked out. To let go Treylon Burks because he has the injury, to let him go. And then he goes and suddenly turns into an okay wide receiver. That would just be a beautiful bow on it Titan story of the Titans era of the last, I guess 10, 15 years. We did have a good run there with Tannehill and Henry, obviously, but yeah, I said I'm falling back into it. I got to remind myself. Anyway, that's it for us. We can't talk anymore about Treylon Burks. That's got to be the end of it. We appreciate you listening. Hopefully we'll have a much more exciting waiver week for you next week. So make sure you subscribe and stick around to hear that. We'll also have a lot more on the podcast this week. Rich and I will do our fantasy preview on Thursday evening, Friday morning. That'll hit your feed. Then Warren will hit your feed on Friday morning, talking about all the best bets of the week with Ryan McChrystal, with Rich Rebar, with Joe Gibbs, talks about ref stuff. Tons of stuff happening on this feed. Make sure you check that out. Also, make sure you head over to sharp.football and check out our free week. Again, you can get access to all of our betting recommendations, all of our fantasy content this week for free, absolutely free. Head over to sharp.football, check out how you do that. And Freeman, I'll be back to talk with you next week.